So after that pretty nasty spill we had down the elevator shaft, we find ourselves on the very bottom floor of the Tokyo Mesh, entering into unknown and very dangerous territory here. If we talk to Ivanov, he does recount some of the information that we got from other members of the Mesh, that we are indeed in an area fully controlled by the Holy Ring, so it might be good to keep our wits about us. I do like the look of the third floor here. Very gothic, very wooden. Very odd looking for getting further and further down, but you know, before we get too far into the third floor, we might as well go through our usual little setup here of checking out the information terminal to get a feel of what's waiting ahead. And all in all, just looking at it, the officer's floor is not too complicated looking. We have a control room that'll control the defense mechanisms down here, which are still in effect. And we do have a central block, which doesn't really have anything of too great importance. Really, what we want to focus on are the two sets of living quarters here to the east and the west. Namely, Section 2 is where we are going to want to end up heading, just because that seems the furthest destination right now. And obviously, from what we can gather from the other security rooms we've had to deal with, we always need a security card to get into them, so probably going to have to keep an eye out for that. It has been a while since we've had to deal with any invisible NPCs, and this one especially is a dangerous one. This Holy Ring member thinks that we are some sacrifice that might have slipped through the hunter's hands. And wouldn't you know it, we are right on time for the Ceremony of Awakening, but I don't know if we really want to go to that just yet. And wouldn't you know it, the Holy Ring member isn't up for a discussion on whether or not we should go. But thankfully we do have our big bruiser Ivanov here to ward off any grasping hands of the Holy Ring members. And it's a good thing we had this hunk around to help ward off that mean cultist, but what is this about an Oregon Special Forces member? Well, that's apparently the organization that Ivanov is a member of, and we learned that from this brand new NPC here, Renee Lorraine. There you go. Pretty unique individual. Now, it doesn't come out immediately, but Renee is French. She's a photojournalist for a newspaper known as DES. Don't know if it's actually ever covered in the game what DES stands for, but needless to say, Renee usually covers the more unusual stories. She calls it the underground beat. I'm not sure if that's meant to be a pun, since, well, she is definitely underground at this point. But it seems that she is familiar with the organization that Ivanov is a part of, this Oregon group, which is apparently definitely not Umbrella, just another big multinational corporation with a heavily armed and trained mercenary force. Still, it does look like she has gotten herself into a bit of a sticky situation down here, though I assume that if she was able to get down to the third floor, she's probably able to handle herself well enough, but Ivanov decides to offer a helping hand and say, 3 is probably better than, just 1. So maybe if we join forces, maybe we could get out of this alive. But, needless to say, the game isn't really set up to handle, 3 partners. And she is an available partner to have if we did not have Ivanov here with us, but considering that we do, Renee decides to just go off on her own. And I will probably be showing her off in the future. I'm going to leave it up to the thread to vote. We don't want to get rid of Ivanov just yet, since we just did get him. And with that, Renee skates off. And Ivanov makes mention that even though she might look like a hottie, she's probably seen some pretty awful things while being an underground beat reporter. I'm sure he does not have some weird crush on her, but while we do wish her the best of luck, we still have to deal with whatever is waiting for us down here. We narrowly missed that cultist. And if you couldn't tell by the sound and the look, the monster has again evolved. I'm not sure if it was just a minor speed increase or anything else, but he is a lot more audible. You'll be able to hear him coming from a lot farther away, but we were able to juke him easily enough, and like I kind of mentioned before, the officer area is mostly straightforward. There are, a few dead ends here and there. These very familiar looking iron bars that we saw back in the factory area are going to be controlled by the security defense mechanisms. But there are a few oddities regarding the officer area. First and foremost, as we head through this door here, we do find ourselves immediately in another brand new area, which is a bit odd. Normally, they give you a little bit more time before just pushing you off into a new area. But this little command center is, just kind of a catwalk connecting 2 sides of the officer area. We do see what seems to be a pretty large structure here in the center, but, we have no way of getting down to it as of right now. Really, it's just a odd little bridging section between the west and east side of the officer area. Now, you can completely circumvent it if the security doors are up, but we don't really have that option as of right now. Also, since we are in a brand new area, the useless residential area rooms that kick us out do have a new static screen, so kudos to that level of detail, I guess. Also, oddly enough, down here in the officer area, if you happen to stumble into one of the rooms, you will find another one of Mole's appraisal areas. You can have him look at some of the new items you've gotten over the course of the game, and, well, more or less, he'll give you just very outdated hints. And I wish I could say that it was of use to go talk to him, but, well, for puzzles coming up, he's not really going to be of much use. And yeah, even though I am dealing with a very limited ammo supply, considering, well, I don't even know how many bullets we have, well, I don't really feel like running around right now. We have a very definite destination. It's going to be in this staircase area here. There are 4 different doors. We only want to check 2 of them. First one being upstairs here. Now, not all of the cult members are immediately aggressive towards us, which is for the best, because we do need a little bit of information here and there. And Kiyama here, or Kayama, is very forthcoming with information, especially about this ceremony of awakening and the forthcoming of their savior, the Dark Messiah. Which suddenly makes sense, considering the title of the game in Japan is, well, Dark Messiah. But yeah, apparently all these people that were being taken were being sacrificed to summon up this Dark Messiah. And, wouldn't you know it, for some reason or another, we are the MacGuffin of the story, and we are pretty much the linchpin that is going to be necessary in summoning up this Dark God. Kiyama here isn't totally knowledgeable as to why, but we are indeed the last piece of the puzzle, and if at all possible, we need to stay away from the Great Hall. Which we are not going to do because we need to go through the Great Hall to get to that mysterious elevator that'll take us back to the surface, but he does paint a very horrifying picture that we are going to be keys to the end of the world if the cultists do get a hold of us. Before we can ask him any more, he just immediately bolts, which causes us to be kicked out of the room. Now, normally he would hold the key to the security room, but I guess it's relative to whoever you have as your partner. If he is not forthcoming with the key, as he doesn't want to cause the end of the world, you're going to have to make a slight detour downstairs and talk to Believer Kosheki. A little bit more of a religious zealot than the other believer upstairs, considering that the other believer, well, was starting to have some questionable feelings about the whole cult thing, but Kosheki here is more than willing to help us as long as we guess the correct name of the god, which we now know to be Dark Messiah. I don't think anything bad happens if we happen to guess the wrong name, but for guessing the correct name, we are considered worthy participants in the ceremony of awakening. And then we get our final security card. With that out of the way, we are one step closer to getting towards the Great Hall. Now, you do want to be careful when trying to make your way back over to the area we just were, as the monster really enjoys patrolling this entire area. It's pretty much just one big square. Really, though, if you're just a little bit careful, there are plenty of pillars and, 90-degree or 45-degree angles that you can just, juke around him, and it's not too difficult to elude him. Still, if you've got a partner with a gun, then it could be marginally easier. I just know that, for the most part, I think most people tend to go with Naomi, so running is usually the only available option for them. Also, in my caution, I'm finally using a feature that I haven't really touched on before, and that's the fact that we can do a quick view 180 to see what's going on behind us while still moving forward. Not super necessary unless you're just being incredibly slow. but it's still a feature there nonetheless. And that odd sound you're hearing is this very, very fast-moving one-way conveyor belt, which I'll never mention on the information service or information terminal. It is a very important thing to keep in mind because, well, we'll see in just a second. First, we're going to meet a wonderful NPC. Yes, Rear Admiral Bushy Mustache here. Or as the game likes to call him, Second Lieutenant Kajiwara. This poor guy is a lot like the other member of the military that we ran into down here back on the first floor. Probably not in full control of his mental capacity, but he does have a very important mission, which was to make sure that whatever horrible beast was being trapped down here didn't make its way outside. And, well, we don't want to give him the bad news that, you know, it was already taken to the surface and has now decided to come back hunting people. And yes, he is a very nationalistic figure, not wanting the land of the rising sun to be overrun by monsters from the bowels of the earth. And while he might not seem to have a useful function as of right now, if you take in consideration where we are, and the fact that there is a one-way conveyor belt there, and right around the corner here we have one of those inoperable gates, you'll slowly start to realize that, well, as we turn this corner here, if you didn't happen to go pick up that security card, you might be in a little bit of a bad state. Or at least it would seem that way. If you did happen to come down here without the security card and without being able to open that gate yourself, if you happen to talk to Kajiwara there twice, he would have a huffin' puffin' hissy fit, and he would finally decide to pull a lever and open up that gate for a one-time usage. So the game isn't entirely dickish. Still, we came down here prepared, so we can now safely turn off the security mechanism. Really surprised they decided to give you a second angle at the San Francisco computer here. The thing is, now that we've turned off the security system, well, there are a few more areas we can go to, but none of them really seem to be that useful. And nothing on the information terminal seemed to hint at any additional areas that we can go to. And really at this point you just want to do a little bit of searching around and hopefully stumble across something that might catch your eye. And really you have to be very, very, very on the ball, because down this corridor here, if you pull up your map, you'll see that there seems to be what appears to be a red dot, normally indicating a door. But instead of a door, we find what appears to be a keycard slot. And if we use our iron card, we find a mysterious hidden staircase. Now, we would not have been able to use the iron card until we turned off the security mechanism. We are now finished with the officer's area, and we can get a better look inside the command center. Really, this is the last major area of the Tokyo Mesh proper. I guess you could call it the heart of the Tokyo Mesh, where everything really gets controlled. And honestly, this seems like a really odd structure to place in such a large cavern, but we are very, very close to the Great Hall, and what I assume to be the center of the Holy Ring activity and our means of getting back to the surface. And as you can probably guess, our means of opening that large gate are waiting here in the command center. Now, there are a few things of interest in here. Some pretty modern looking pieces of equipment, a number of ID card slots, and an ID card reader. And, well, to be quite frank, this could be one of the more absolutely dickish instances in the entire game. And it may not seem like it initially, but to really start this puzzle in motion, the first thing we have to do, and it will not seem obvious, is to use the CD-ROM in the computer. Yes, that CD-ROM that you could have easily overlooked back in the factory area in that one room off to the side. We have to stick in the computer. And it gives us a list of what appears to be members of the Holy Ring with their very fancy titles. And a few of the names are differently colored, perhaps to give us some type of hint. And no, you can't control the speed at which those names pop by, so hopefully you were paying attention. Now, we do have these 3 card slots, and we only have a few possibilities of things to use, especially if we go through our inventory here. We're obviously not going to stick a small key in it, but we do have the security cards, and those indeed are what we need to use. Now, there is a third step to the puzzle, and that's the fact that we have to stick these cards in a very particular order. As to what that order is, well, for most people that play this, trial and error, but from talking to my good friend Panzerskank, she was thinking that perhaps the characters on the cards spelled out something. She mentioned that the words were man, earth, heaven, and then maybe putting them in the order we did spelled out celestial body, something like that. Either way, by solving all of that, we now have access to the Great Hall, and you may be wondering why that is so dickish. Well, if you did not grab that CD-ROM back on the previous floor, you would not be able to interact with those card slots, and you would not be able to continue. And guess how you can get back to get to that CD-ROM? You can't. If you got to this point and you overwrote your saves on the second floor, you'd be completely stuck, and you would not be able to continue on. You'd probably have to start a brand new game, but we won't worry about that. Instead, we are going to enter the station and make our way to the Great Hall. So, color me surprised, but there is a apparently very much working train system deep underground in Tokyo. And it's apparently the only lifeline between the rest of the Tokyo mesh and this mysterious Great Hall. And as that is the case, we do run into Renee, and possibly one more final time, in case we I think this is another opportunity to get her in as a partner in case, you know, whoever you currently had was taken out by the monster. And it is pretty amazing that it is still in working order, considering it's probably been in disuse for 30 or 40 years, you know, if you had to make a guess. And she also does mention that this is the only way between the Tokyo Mesh and the Great Hall, so hopefully nothing ever happens to this train, because otherwise everyone would be very screwed. Also, it's at this point that you do get the impression that she is French. They do try to give some weird dialect or inflection to her speech by removing the H's, but that makes me think of more a Cockney thing than anything. But that little bit of misspelling there, we have now left the Tokyo Mesh proper and are in the very heart of the Holy Ring. Just what do we expect to find down here? Well, the visuals really do set the mood. As we might recall from the almost first part of the game, there was a mysterious ancient cavern found down here where they unearthed whatever the hybrid ended up being. Well, if we did want to just make our way straight inside, there is a massive door blocking our way. Through our tenacity, we are going to have to find some other way inside, because even if it seems like a massively bad idea, we still had to go along with it. Thankfully, through a bit of searching, we do manage to find what appears to be a very large crack in the infrastructure here. And with a little bit of finagling, this is going to be our way inside the temple. And what a temple it is. Three things to investigate. The first, most important thing clearly being this elevator shaft, our means of getting back to the surface. But it's probably a bit hard to tell from the image, but along the bottom of the picture there are just rows and rows of Holy Ring cultists, so no help there. We also see what appears to be the head of the Holy Ring itself, this... I hazard to call this a person, possibly a weird mutation of being underground for so long, but really, before we can get into wondering whatever the hell this priest is supposed to be, Ivanov, in his infinite wisdom, feels that this entire event reminds him of something that happened to him long ago while he was a mercenary down in Africa. They were having to do some kind of dispute between rival tribes, and he was forced by his colonel to take out pretty much the head of one of the tribes, which was a witch doctor. Now, this witch doctor, you know, Ivanov was not one to believe in the supernatural, but this witch doctor really put the fear of God to Ivanov. And he happened to crash one of their parties, and even while hiding in the shadows, this witch doctor knew that they were there. And as the witch doctor was talking, possibly conjuring up some spell, really just putting the evil hoodoo all over the room, possibly getting all their men ready for battle, the witch doctor did put his eyes upon Ivanov and his men hiding in the shadows. And it was then that one of Ivanov's men, struck by what Ivanov merely calls the witch doctor's quote-unquote evil eye, that one of Ivanov's men suddenly started to scratch and tear at his own throat and just keeled over dead on the spot. It was then that Ivanov, understandably, bolted. He left that place as quickly as he possibly could, along with most of his men. Somehow, another 2 of his men were also struck down in a similar state. Now, as to why he decides to recount such a very, very long and very, very terrifying story to us at this particular moment is probably pretty obvious. Needless to say, I think it is a bit out of place. I assume that he is just inches away from our face in the shadows trying to really spook the hell out of us, but I'm sure he means well, or that he's just a big bruising idiot. But yeah, our final thing to investigate is this strange stone. Now, it's probably just a trick of the light, but it seems like this stone is almost moving, which is the least of our concerns.